Joseph Stalin, the most powerful and ruthless dictator in modern history. For decades, until his death in 1953, he ruled the largest country in the world, the Soviet Union, with an iron fist. He based his absolute power on his secret police, the NKVD. Then the largest intelligence service in the world, its agents were highly professional and unspeakably brutal. The NKVD's primary mission was to serve Stalin and destroy his enemies, both at home and abroad. The might of the NKVD was deeply rooted in the Comintern, an international communist organization headquartered in Moscow. On the 18th of December 1940, Hitler signed Directive Number 21, Operation Barbarossa, his plan to invade the Soviet Union. Less than 2 weeks later, Stalin received information about Barbarossa from his agents in Europe. Soon after, the intelligence was confirmed by Stalin's key spy in Japan, Richard Sorge. Sorge was among the most clever and fearless spies of World War II. The information he sent back to Russia was priceless and instrumental in changing the outcome of the war.
Richard Sorge was born in Russia of German father, Russian mother. As a kid, went to Germany, served in the German army in World War I. About 1920, he gets enamored with the Communist Party, building the new Russia, building the new world. He begins to work for Russian military intelligence.
In 1933, Sorge went to Germany on a secret mission. He joined the Nazi Party and started working for one of the major German daily newspapers, the Frankfurter Zeitung. Shortly thereafter, he was sent to Japan as the paper's Asian correspondent.
In Tokyo, representing a German newspaper and letting out very pro-Nazi views and feelings to whomever he meets, he gets along beautifully with the Japanese, who are fascists. He's a hero to them. He's a German, and he is Nazism personified in his political views. So a lot of Japanese politicians and even some military share their views with him, which Sorge immediately sends back to Russia.
In Tokyo, Richard Sorge became a frequent and welcome visitor at the German embassy. In 1939, the German ambassador to Japan, General Otto, appointed Sorge the official press attaché of the embassy. The two men became close friends. By that time, Sorge had a well-functioning operation. His agents infiltrated the highest echelons of military and political power in Japan. Miles away in Siberia, a secret Soviet radio station regularly received transmissions containing top-secret information about military preparations, both in Japan and Germany, signed by Sorge's codename, Ramsay. One of his cables contained key excerpts from the top-secret Operation Barbarossa. It read, "The armed forces of Wehrmacht must be ready to destroy Soviet Russia in a blitzkrieg campaign before the end of the war against Great Britain."
Barbarossa was a top-secret plan. Only 8 people knew about it in Germany. A few weeks later, the plan was on Stalin's table. But Stalin did not believe his own intelligence. He could not acknowledge that his intelligence service was so brilliant that it managed to get this information so quickly.
When Stalin learned Sorge was the source, his only remark was, "It's a provocation. He's a double agent." Sorge's fate was sealed. He was ominously summoned to Moscow. But Richard Sorge did not obey. He decided not to return. By now, German embassies from Moscow to Tokyo were buzzing with activity. From Japan, Sorge reported to Moscow. The German ambassador in Tokyo, General Otto, got a confirmation from von Ribbentrop that Germany would invade in the second part of June. There is no doubt that this information is true. signed Ramsay. A few days later, Sorge sent another cable. The message was brief. The war will start on June 22, 1941. Moscow replied, "We doubt the authenticity of your information." Now Sorge was desperate, even insistent. The fate of millions hung in the balance. He sent yet another cable to Stalin. It carried his most chilling message. "I repeat, 9 armies incorporating 150 divisions will invade the Soviet Union, crossing the border on June 22nd. Stalin was deaf to all pleas, blind to the reports that lay before him. On the 22nd of June, 1941, Hitler's armies struck. It was a devastating attack. On the very first day, the German blitzkrieg destroyed practically all the Russian tanks, artillery pieces, and aircraft stationed near the border. Most Soviet planes never made it off their runways. Over the next 4 months, the Germans slaughtered nearly all of the Red Army, 3.5 million men. Another 1.5 million soldiers were taken prisoner. Only then did Stalin turn to his spymasters for help, and he had one very crucial question for them. By the end of October 1941, Hitler's army was closing in on Moscow. Stalin's defenses were further weakened by fear of a Japanese strike in Siberia. Army divisions badly needed to defend Moscow were tied down in the Far East to face a possible Japanese attack. The Japanese were still contemplating where to strike next, at the Soviets in Siberia or at the British and Americans in Southeast Asia. The key Soviet spy in Japan, Richard Sorge, had many agents and friends close to the Japanese government. For months he'd been trying to convince them that the Japanese would be much better off getting hold of the precious resources of tin, rubber, and oil in Southeast Asia, rather than face a difficult winter campaign in Siberia. In time, Sorge learned that Japan had abandoned all plans to attack the Soviet Union. This was the news Stalin had been waiting for. Having correctly predicted the German invasion, Sorge had the ear of Moscow. Months earlier, Sorge bought a fishing boat. Together with his radio operator, they installed a radio transmitter and began regular boat trips into the open sea to transmit radio messages. On a day when his operator was ill, Sorge took the boat out himself and transmitted critical news.
Probably the most important information he sends back to Moscow is that he is able to tell Stalin that the Japanese have no intention of invading Siberia to support the Germans. Hence, Stalin is able to take many of the divisions that he had in Siberia to counter the Japanese, push them to his Western Front. At the last minute, saved Moscow, saved the Russian capital.
On November 7th, 1941, on the 24th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution, the fresh Russian troops from Siberia paraded through Moscow. Straight from the parade, they marched to the front line, a mere 40 kilometers from Red Square. Outside Moscow, the German advance ground to a halt. It was their first defeat in the Second World War. Richard Sorge's greatest triumph was also his last. After 8 years undercover, he was unmasked and imprisoned by Japanese military intelligence. Sorge was one of a handful of dedicated, imaginative, and fearless Soviet intelligence agents who made a substantial contribution to the Russian war effort. But Stalin refused an offer to exchange him for a Japanese agent being held in Moscow. On the very day Stalin made his speech, Sorge was executed by the Japanese.